Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Art and Design Education During a Pandemic. I am Andrea Paciotto, a professor at the Seoul Institute of the Arts and director of the CultureHub Europe. This webinar is organized in collaboration between the Seoul Institute of the Arts and the Amsterdam University of Applied Science. We thank all the participants that have accepted this invitation, and we thank all our attendees that are following this webinar both in Zoom as well as in the live stream through YouTube, Facebook, and other social media. And please remember that you can always ask questions and participate by writing comments, both in the social media as well as here in Zoom. So without further ado, I would like to invite to connect Professor Frank Kresin and Professor Cecily Kwon. Professor Kresin is the Dean of the Faculty of Creative Industries in the Amsterdam University of Applied Science, Faculty of Digital Media and Creative Industries, and Cecily Kwon is the Dean of Foreign External Relations and Liberal Studies here at the Seoul Institute of the Arts. So please, Cecily and Frank, if you're here. Yes.
Sure.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Welcome and thank you to be with us. We are
nice to be here.
Really thankful that both universities have collaborated to organize this webinar. And we would like you to introduce yourself and give a little introduction about this conversation. Please, if you don't mind starting, Cecily.
Sure. Hello, my name is Cecily, and I teach English at Seoul Institute of the Arts, and I'm also the head of the international relations here. We are very happy to be hosting this timely event with Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. If I may share a
Please.
file. Yes. Oops. Okay, I will. It's my honor to be hosting this event and on the topic of art and design education during a pandemic. What an era we live in with COVID-19. Within the last 6 months, over 9 million people have been infected by the tiny virus and claimed over 50,000 lives around the world. Education suddenly came to a halt as the situation prolonged, we had no choice but to turn online. Both teachers, students, and everybody was caught unprepared. And we have been and still are in a lot of stress as we reinvent our teaching methods to suit the situation, trying to get used to the new norm of untact. Albert Einstein once said, "In every difficulty lies opportunity." But I found myself asking, okay, where's the difficulty? I mean, I see the difficulty, but where's the opportunity? I just couldn't find it. Maybe Albert was just giving us some BS. And then one day, with a loud Zoom, came Zoom, whose name I had never heard of before, but which I can't live without right now, as I'm using it every day for my classes, for meetings, for conferences like this. But teaching has become increasingly difficult for those whose field requires face-to-face methods, such as in performing arts and studio arts. And for those of us whose tendency is tactile, you meet a really good friend and it's practically illegal to hug. So this is what we have to do. Korea is one of the first countries to be hit by the virus next to China. When the daily confirmed cases hit 800 at the end of February, we were all in shock. But unfortunately, the record was to be broken by many countries. Korea's medical staff and everyone in the whole country was extremely diligent and trying to control the outbreak, and it soon subsided. And we started our spring classes 1 month late in April, but only via online platforms. When Korea was around 10 cases per day for more than 10 days, we started our production classes face-to-face, following government guidelines. And although we are now starting what may be a second wave in Korea, our classes are still running and there has been no new cases on campus. So I would like to just briefly share with you what we have been doing to keep our students from getting infected while still studying and making art together. Here's the new norm to enter your class. I hope it'll be helpful for those of you who are going to be opening your classes soon. First, the school sent messages to all students and asked if they would like to attend face-to-face classes, if they feel safe enough to do that. When over 70% of the students said yes, the class can open, but the professor has to provide materials for those who cannot come due to a variety of reasons, such as living too far away or not feeling safe enough or being in isolation. This is the photo of our campus. The red bridge is the library, and those tents you see on the far right are the safety gate, is the safety gate that we put up, which you need to pass through in order to get to class. When you get closer, here are there are tables where students have to disinfect their hands and write their personal information and check questions inquiring about their health and temperature in the daily registration form, wearing a face covering. Then you enter through those tents, you submit your registration. The temperature camera checks your body temperature. And when you're considered okay, they give you a stamp on your hand. This is what happens when you don't wash your hands up to your wrist. And this person is in big trouble. She played with the stamp. Okay. And if by any chance you do have fever or feel sick, this is a container box where you have to wait until the ambulance comes to take you to the hospital. We gave every student what we call a safety pack with 3 masks, disinfectant spray, refill packs, and disinfected wet tissue. In every class, there are disinfectants for students to use. They have to use it when they enter the class. Students have to sit at least 1 meter apart, and the maximum number allowed per class is 15. They need to have their masks on during the entire class. And we leave Zoom on during class so that students who cannot come can participate with Zoom. This student is not wearing a mask because this is an acting class, and in the acting class, the person who is showing or modeling, whatever, can take the mask off for the short period. Actually, Seoul Institute of the Arts former president and visionary Dak Kyung-yu predicted that such an era as this would come. So he founded CultureHub. This is a photo of CultureHub in Korea, where students in Korea. And there is also a CultureHub in New York and Los Angeles, Indonesia, and Italy. CultureHub is a network of studios that are linked, with which we can have multi-location, multicultural, simultaneous and interactive events, such as classes, workshops, performances, concerts, and more. Because the screen is life-size, it gives a feeling of presence of the other party. This is a concert that we performed with UC San Diego, excuse me, in December. You can see the people in the front row are in Korea, people in the back row are in San Diego. And we performed it together in one room, so to speak. This is a photo of Romeo and Juliet, which we presented 10 years ago. Juliet is in ancient time Korea. Romeo is in present day New York. We have done hundreds of experiments and telematics performances and education, which I believe Billy Clark, the director of New York CultureHub, will talk to you in more detail. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you all to join us, as we are soon opening our doors and accepting more members in this network, providing the necessary software as well. I believe in this area of intact, we really need to upgrade our technology and join forces to allow for quality arts, quality education available to all. So where is the opportunity during this time of pandemic? You just might see it tonight. If you're in Asia, if you're in the West, you might see it today. Thank you, stay safe and stay healthy.
Cecily?
Yes, thank you.
And we now let Frank present his introduction.
Dear Cecily, dear Andrea, dear all, great to meet you, albeit virtually, in this truly worldwide event to discuss art and design education during a global pandemic. It's humbling to be in the presence of renowned experts from Seoul, from the US, Rome, and Amsterdam. And this meeting demonstrates the power of the CultureHub to connect people from all over the world to share, discuss, and co-create, even more in time of crisis. So I'm Frank, the Dean of the Faculty of Digital Media and Creative Industries at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, and we hope soon to be part of the CultureHub network. The topic of this meeting is of course highly relevant to all of us, and I look forward to hear your ideas and best practices, but also learn from your failures, as is in the program. I'm really looking forward to that as well. So over the past month, the global pandemic has struck hard in our societies and in our professional and personal lives. We and many of our colleagues, parents, children, and friends have all been affected, either by the disease itself or our duty to care for our loved ones, but in any case, by the temporary restrictions that have been imposed on our lives. This has affected all sectors in society, and of course, this includes higher education. So engaging in higher education as a student means ruthlessly carving out a substantial slice of your time and attention to further develop yourselves, to gain specific knowledge and skills, to socialize and build networks, and also to develop and grow as a person, both as an individual and as a full member of society. At the heart of this lies the voluntary encounter between the student and the teacher, and the students amongst themselves. By closing our classrooms and facilities, our potential to stage these encounters has diminished with enormous effects. While we have turned to digital tools instead, a lot has been lost, to the detriment of students, teachers, and society alike. Well, this is true for all higher education, but I'd argue especially true in art and design education that needs studios, special tools and equipment, stages, and intense human-to-human emotional exchanges. Our disciplines have in this respect been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And until there are vaccines or medicines, the restrictions will stay in some form or another. So it's practically helpful to learn from each other's lessons in order how to cope with the crisis and creatively deal with its restrictions. And Cecily has just shown a way to go. Thank you for that. There's yet another reason why we need to convene and collaborate. And this has nothing to do with the practical side of how we run our institutions, but with the ability of art and design to help us conquer the pandemic. I'm not implying that we can actually develop a vaccine, but art and design can help us to imagine alternative futures, to tell impactful stories, to understand our human predicament, and to develop new narratives that guide our way into our post-pandemic lives. These, I'd argue, are dearly needed, and we can actually do so. But finally, and maybe even most important, we should discuss how art and design can challenge governments and companies that use Corona as a pretext to implement measures to permanently control and restrict human freedom and liberties. As much as we need a healthy population and safety from diseases, we need open democracies that enable humans to flourish. Whether this comes under pressure, or wherever this comes under pressure, art and design should stand up and present us with a mirror. What it has done in the past, it can do, and it should do so now again. This is all to be summed up in 5 words. Thank you for being here. I'm very proud to take part in the CultureHub, and I'm very interested in learning what this gathering will bring. And I'm sure this will be the beginning of a fruitful collaboration. Thank you for being here, and looking forward to work with you in the future. And stay healthy, stay safe. I take that from Cecily.
Thank you very much, Cecily, and thank you, Frank. And it was wonderful that our universities put an effort in organizing this, which hopefully will be the first one of many events to have in the future. So I will now ask our 5 guest speakers to turn on their camera and join the conversation. We have tried to make an effort to invite a diverse group of professionals in the field of education, art, and design. They come from different countries and from different backgrounds. And we will talk about technology and how that has entered our daily work and how it's affecting education, but also we talk about the impact that this has on the education, on the students, and on the disciplines that each one is teaching. So we have prepared a series of questions that we have already introduced to our guests. So I will announce the first question and then invite you to really address and answer without too much formality, and so that this conversation can be at the same time informative but also, interesting and challenging. So the first question is connected to the request of introducing yourself. So we would like you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit how your teaching practice has been adapted and transformed to accommodate this new situation of social distancing. Who would like to begin with the introduction? Maybe I should ask, yes, Billy to start, please.
Hi, my name is Billy Clark, and I'm the founding artistic director of CultureHub. And to answer that question, as Cecily pointed out, we've been working digitally, teaching online, and doing other activities online for about a decade now. But I think that a large portion of our focus was on really connecting rooms and integrating into rooms and creating hybrid spaces that were both physical and digital. And so in this moment, as everyone is completely distributed, I think that has been, a very large shift in terms of adapting how you teach and what it means to try to create as everyone is distributed. So I think that's an interesting conversation. I don't want to dig in too deep right now, but I think there are a lot of interesting conversations about that. Excavating the opportunities, I think, is within the limitations is something that's very dear to my heart, and I think central to creative practice. So I'm curious how all of you have dealt with that challenge.
Maybe you can also mention what kind of classes you're teaching currently in this situation. And
so we have several CultureHub classes going on, but the one that I'm most centrally involved in is called nonlinear storytelling. And in that, it goes year round and sort of changes semester by semester. It has two phases. One, which is more of an introduction to linear storytelling, I suppose, as a way to understand how to then conceptualize and begin to tell stories in more nonlinear fashions. So things like branched narrative, or also focused a lot on 360, so the spatialization of media as it relates to storytelling and all of the challenges that sort of exist in that space. So I think, for us, one of the largest challenge is the access to equipment. So things that you would generally use in your creative practice are no longer available to the students in the same way. I think that in some ways we were prepared for that because we had always put more of an emphasis on the creative idea than the actual piece of technology that was being used, because we felt that was probably going to change soon and rapidly. So it's more important to focus on the idea, but I don't expect that is that's always the case. And certainly there's a need to teach tools.
Okay, thank you. Someone would, on the other side of the world, present their work and introduce themselves.
Shall I say something about
Please.
So I'm Frank from the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, also not to confuse with the other Frank, he's my boss. I am working at the CMD, the Communication and Multimedia Department, and I teach there. You call me a professor in the introduction, but a professor is something totally different in Holland, so I feel like an imposter now, but I'm teaching. I'm a design professional who teaches, so that's the way how I look at it. We teach our students how to make digital products for the most part, and digital media. And so we work with, I work with like 100 colleagues with these students, 1,500 students that have a mindset of doing everything digital already. So I think it was fairly easy to adapt to the situation, although it was a real big step anyhow. But I can say that what we have done in the last couple of 3 months, I think, that we are very proud in the first place to have been, to transform all our whole curriculum into an online curriculum. We had to do a lot of work. So, for example, we have made classes that, or like, for example, our students that had traineeships, we had to come up with a solution for traineeships, because all these companies are working from home and they don't take traineeships. we facilitated an agency within our school, and that was very successful. And also with online communication, it went fairly well, but it was also very tiring. I felt a sort of a Zoom fatigue, if you like, after a couple of weeks already, and after a couple of months, I think, and I see everybody nodding. So I think I can speak for everybody that it's a whole different ball game teaching online, and it's like turning. A colleague of mine said it's like turning yourself on and off again. So that's how I feel too. It's really you have to stay focused, and then you can turn yourself off and on. Also, maybe nice to mention that I have 2 projects in the making. A minor, it's called Immersive Environments, that I would like to share with in the CultureHub if we have a sort of a opportunity there. And also we have a cross-cultural data literacy project that's also going to be online. So that's my contribution now.
Great, thank you. Yes,
I can go.
This agency that connects the school with the outside world. We would like to hear more. Also, just before Gilberto does his introduction, I would like you to consider that the attendees, they're writing some questions in the chat. So keep an eye on that. And when you see that there is some question that is relevant to your work, you can maybe just address it so that we don't leave anyone behind. Thank you, Gilberto.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for organizing this amazing possibility for us to be together and to reflect. I'm Gilberto Scaramuzzo. I work at the University of Roma 3. I am a professor of pedagogy of expression. So I study and I teach the connection between art and education. When arrived the pandemic, I was not ready at all because I came from theater. So lesson for me was in the realm of theater, was a performance, a theater performance. So I went online, I searched, and I found that, well, I teach at Roma 3 University and also at the National Academy of Dance. So I have different students. I had only one lesson with them, then the pandemic came. I was at home searching what I can do. I went online, I saw the expert, and they say you need 1 month to change to re-prepare in another way. I thought that I couldn't let the student wait such a long time because they were suddenly alone at home. So I started. I didn't know how to start. Anyway, my university gave me the possibility to use a platform, a Moodle platform, to put material. So I started recording things. Then I felt so without energy after this recording. Then I said, no, I had to do lesson. So I started lesson, but I didn't start in the right way because I tried to do lesson as I did before. I mean, a sort of lecture format, but it was difficult for me to have interaction. So then I've learned, and I was very tired, exhausted. I went just after the lesson, spent a lot of energy. I didn't have anything back. You know the theater. So in the theater, you feel the public, you feel the reaction, you can see the people. So what I can do, it was in another realm. So I had to change, was another sort of performance. But what this was connecting for me was to create relationship. So what I started was to ask the people to be present. I wanted to see them and I want them to speak a lot. So I start to speak less, to work with different media also. We had a movie, we had a theater, a work of theater. So, but this work we saw by ourselves. When we were together, we just discussed about what we have seen. So I used different platforms, a Moodle for a forum online during the week, lessons in presence with lots of interaction. You could see the students with the close-up, and it was a big thing because in our classes you cannot have this close-up. So we were in another realm. So you could see the person in front of you, and you can be with them, and you can't in a normal class. So it was something great. So look, it's interesting. I thought we can see the person, we can see close-up. We are more close to cinema, to a movie. We have to find other ways. So different people, different characters come into and out from the lesson, not only me. Then I asked the people to be in their place, in their environment, so we could see the house of the people, and it created more, I would say, the person were more rich because there was not only themselves, but also the things around them. So it became interesting to see that, to see the people speaking. So forum online during the week. Then a group of Facebook, a close group of Facebook, where all the different lessons, so Academy of Dance, undergraduate, postgraduate, all went there with a different lesson, with the different books, different issues, different movies, different capabilities. And then I have to them to create videos as well. So we have on Facebook different video to explain what is the experience for them. So the mix of all these and the lesson in presence, very active, asking a lot, allow the participant to speak and to say their things was my strategies. And slowly, I became a little bit better in doing that.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear coming from a completely non-technological environment, how this new platform changed your way of teaching. So we will go more in depth later on.
Yes.
It would be interesting to hear other experiences.
I guess I'll go. So I'm Alex Ball. I'm associate professor, not a professor, at Ryerson University. I teach in the New Media program, which has been in existence for over 20 years. And the program focuses on hybrid media, looking at physical computing, virtual environments, digital, etc. In terms of my teaching, I teach both studio-oriented classes and large lectures, and I've done it all. I've been teaching for over 30 years, so I have experience in all kinds of domains. And my PhD was focused on the impact of new media on education. So this is kind of very interesting because I'm seeing happen things that we were discussing already 20 years ago. So my experience with COVID has been interesting. I'm a strong believer that the classroom is not for me to lead, but for the students to lead. And the way my classrooms are organized, I barely lecture. I set up and design an experience for the students, and then the students take over the classroom, let it be in a studio or let it be in a lecture. So I was very fortunate this winter when COVID hit, because I was teaching 2 classes and we already had 6 weeks behind us, which means that the set out of the class had been already worked out, the flow of the class was worked out, the students knew what was expected of them. And really the only new, and my classrooms always have a huge digital component. Everything is happening through Google Drive, through this and that. So really when we moved to COVID, the only thing that changed was that instead of them owning a space, physical space, they started owning a virtual space. So that went surprisingly well. I was expecting a lot more hiccups. And then that got me thinking, why didn't we struggle more? And I came to realize that the way we set up our classrooms and the workflow we set up, if they're set up in a way that is consistent, the adaptation doesn't require them to relearn everything. The only thing that's going to change is going to be the platform. I'm also a strong believer that our ways of teaching really need to be adapted to our students' communication modes. And the digital natives are not the same as non-digital natives. They communicate, have very rich social lives within digital environments, and we just don't know those. And so what I found is that, and I realized this a few years back when reaction to students, because Gilberto, you were saying, you come from performance, teaching in a lecture context is a performance. And part of the performance is getting an answer from your public or from the students. And I started realizing that their nonverbal communication was not the same as mine anymore. They do not react with their bodies the way my generation would. And it made me realize that, however, if you put them within a digital system and start getting them to communicate that way, they do. So for instance, avatars. For COVID, our fourth year graduating show went into a Zoom session, and one of the students was using his Hub avatar. So Hub is a VR platform. And the students who's normally extremely shy became a completely different person. So it was really fascinating to see him inhabit his own space and bringing us into his regular space. So I do find COVID a really interesting time where we are being, I think, educated in the technologies of our youth, and having to transform our teaching to become part of the digital environment that our students have been in for at least 20 years. So I think it's a great opportunity for renewing ourselves, and also for starting to inhabit these spaces, which are really powerful, but yet invisible spaces, and have very strong communication modes that I feel sometimes very blind to. So I do see it as an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Troy.
I guess that leaves me. Hi, I'm Troy Nachtigall. I'm the lecturer or professor of fashion research and technology, also at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. I work directly with a school called Amphi, which is the Amsterdam Fashion Institute. I guess we had a little bit more of a difficult time because we are talking about a specialized arena of making physical prototypes on very specialized machines, even using computer software that we couldn't very often install on the actual devices of our students. It requires specialized computer systems to run. So we faced a larger challenge in that department. Interestingly enough, as a professor in the Dutch system, I don't actually teach very often. I'm more on the research side. Although I was teaching a course in Aarhus University on shape-changing objects and spaces this semester. So I already had this challenge of teaching at a distance that stopped about halfway through. And I think it was very interesting for me, the fact that we had to go back and take a step back in the practices of the students that we were working with. And I really think that they had to start looking at the tools that they were working with and the tools that they were making with. And so we really ended up in a really great moment for critical technical practices. So people could actually look at the instruments and the tools that they had available to them in their own homes and start criticizing them in a way that they could understand, I have these tools in my studio, they have those tools in the studio at university. How does having those tools change the way that I work? And how does the tool directly affect the outcomes that I have from those forms of making? So in having to go to their home studios where they very often didn't have a 3D printer, didn't have a laser cutter, had to go back to cutting and sewing on a table, sewing by hand instead of sewing with a sewing machine. Many of these different ways, they had to go back and really look at that practice again and really evaluate deeply the kind of tacit knowledge that we've often embedded in the machine. Serena in the questions was asking about that tacit knowledge, and very often I looked to the paper by Laura Devendorf and very much encouraged everybody that I knew to look to the paper by Laura Devendorf in this period called Being the Machine. And in Being the Machine, she asked several artists and designers to pretend that they were a 3D printer, and she had a laser pointer drawing an object using G-code, but it would just sit there and draw the object. But the person had to take cake decorating, they had to take glue, they had to take a number of different objects, and they actually had to build the object while the computer was telling them where to go over and over again. And they could speed it up and slow it down. And they had to see how the object came out based upon they were the machine, and they could embody the machine themselves. And through that embodiment, learn what the machine was doing and learn what kind of tacit knowledge was embedded in their head and what kind of tacit knowledge had been embedded in the actual tool itself, and to really understand the differences between those. So I'm currently working on a Unseam project, which is a project about shrinking fabric down. So instead of cutting and sewing, how do we actually just take this fabric and make it shrink down into specific sizes to kind of make clothes in a new way? I'm also really driving forward a 3D knitwear field lab where we're actually making finished garments on 3D knitting machines. But in this process, we're taking serious data and using that data as the material that we create with. So I really think it's an interesting moment to ask in the physical world and the making of physical things, those really deep questions about the tools that surround us and how do we interact with those tools.
Thank you, Troy. And as a conclusion of this first round, we would like to hear Kim Deon, please.
Yeah, I think I'm the loser of the timing game because I'm going last. Okay, I prepare some pictures slide because the English is not my mother tongue. Hang on, it's okay. Do you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dae Hong Kim. I'm a faculty member of digital arts at the Seoul Institute of the Arts, and these are what I teach in my school. I'm more likely technician in art university, so my role is like tutoring students, teaching them how to code and programming. That's my job. For this semester, I'm teaching interactive design and game sound design, and I'll briefly share how I adapted and transformed my offline classes to online classes. For my sound design, it was relatively easy because this is about teaching digital tools. Most of students have learned game engines such as Unreal or Unity, and this semester they are learning audio middleware called Wise and Fmod. And through Zoom, I show them how to use the tools, and because the lecture was online, so that I can record my class activities and share the recorded video clips to students after class. After about 8 weeks of the class passed, I asked my students about this method, and they loved it because they can watch the lectures over and over. So far this I just brought like 2 students work. This is one of my students work. So he all the recorded sound effects and music's home. And this is another one. Oops. So far it's so good, but then again it's relatively easy for them because it's about learning tools. For my other class called Interactive Design and Game, it was a little more challenging because this class is for freshmen and aim to teach them interactive design for interactive art making. I spent half of semester explaining the theory and the rest half of to lead them make creative board games. That was like my regular curriculums. It was not a problem to convey the theory online. We even played Mafia game online. And this is the picture of when we playing the Mafia game. Mafia game is one of very famous party game in Korea. So like some of group became a mafia and some of them is cop. So I have to detect who is a mafia and who is cop and who is normal persons. However, you can imagine making board games and play it with other students was an issue. It was very challenging. So I changed my curriculums and give my students the first assignment to make a solitaire-like game, which is you can play alone. So this is some of the assignment my students did. So it worked great online because it can be shown to everyone in the class by camera close-up, just like what Gilberto said. So it wasn't normally cannot be presented to students because there's no camera in my classroom, but it works unexpectedly great on online. For the final assignment, it was very hard for students to make like physical board game and play it with other online. So I needed something different. In order to make interactive contents digitally or online, you need a programming skill. But because this is for freshmen, most of them do not know how to code. So I used special online tool. I searched and found an online platform called Blockcells. It is for like the primary students or younger students to teach them how to make games. So I gave a task of making game with some conditions and or limitations that they learned from the theory. So they just finished their first alpha version. At the same time, they're playing each other's game and give feedback online. So, and they are now modifying it and making improve based on the other students' feedbacks. And that will be their final assignments. That's how I did so far. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for this introduction, which is very interesting and is raising a lot of questions. Some of you already started addressing later questions. And so we will maybe can combine a few of these together. In our case, in the Seoul Institute of the Arts, we were lucky because the COVID emergency started earlier, but the government very quickly managed to keep the situation under control. So already some of the practical, the studio-based classes were able to reopen, as Cecily mentioned, face-to-face classes with limited number of students and the social distancing. And during we noticed that during the first part, when we were all online, there was a strange phenomenon of a higher attendance. Students were less absent in some classes, and that was interesting because I guess from home they can connect, they can wake up 5 minutes earlier and just be in class, or sometimes they turn off the monitor to hide if they're doing something that is not too private. And in my experience also, my biggest question is about what we expect this experience will lead us in the future. And I will just say something very personal, which is the fact that I have a small baby now. This is just 3 months old. And this reminds me how important it is, the actual contact, the human contact for the process of learning, the process of sharing, the process of experiencing. And as we go through our education, we imagine also our future. Certainly we have to adapt to this emergency, but as artists or designers, what contribution we can give to try to bring in this environment, which seems to be cold, a touch of that contact, the human contact. And so I would like to ask you, maybe you can expand a little bit more about the things that you missed from the face-to-face and also the new discoveries that you had, some of you already mentioned, but also how do you envision that this will, what will happen in the future, in the next few years? Alexandra.
I think we're going to see a surge in professions that are related to online learning, is what I think. We're already, it's quite interesting. I'm in Canada, and at not the university level, but underneath, there was a trend towards online learning, but without really thinking about the pedagogy of online learning, because the assumption is that, well, it's cheap, right? And we can see universities right now thinking, hey, if we move to online, look, we're going to save a lot of money. But here's the thing, education is not information distribution. It's about something completely different. It's about embodied knowledge. It's about the relationships we build with each other. It's about building social networks. You've all mentioned all of this. And Kim, your point well taken, a first-year student moving into a first experience of university does not have the intellectual tools just quite yet and the autonomy to be doing really well in an online world. That's very different if you're talking about a graduate student who knows why they're there, who are very focused, or upper year students who already have a way of working, or first year students, it's going to be really different. So what I would think, and already we're starting to see this in the academic journals in America, which is job posting, developers, educational material developers, expertise in pedagogy is required, and universities are starting to hire that. So I think if this continues for more than a year, we're going to see a really big shift in what education means, and realizing that it isn't about just information gathering that we can get in a book, but that there's a whole process attached to that, and that will become part of what the online world will be. I'm hoping I'm making sense.
Please.
So I'd like to respond to that, Alexandra, because I think it's really interesting, because that is what we're happening. When this crisis really set in, I actually changed my course that was building interfaces, from interfaces for tangible objects, went from this idea of actually building the interface itself to building the programming device and building the interface to program that device. And so this idea of designing for emergent situations came forth, and how much of that actually came down to how do we build the interface for people to program these situations, to do different things, became very apparent. And I think that was very interesting, how that really became the focus of the students very quickly. Moreover, I think something really interesting happened, and that I went back and I looked at the first bubonic plagues. So 1147, coming off of from the Silk Roads and Marco Polo. And it's really the moment that we went from kind of a schooling sense of people gathering in one place, and this high idea in Europe of the cottage industry and sorry, that's me. The cottage industry and the kind of apprentice model came into being. So this idea that there is a apprentice and a master, then that kind of, only having really strict contact. So I actually see something really interesting happen, where we might actually have larger classes for the general knowledge, but that we'll see a much more one-to-one transaction of person to person in those circumstances. And I promise I turned to do not disturb on, so I don't know why that was ringing.
So sorry, just to rephrase the last part, you mean that we shift more to a one-to-one education? I
think that in some of the tangible things and in the embodied knowledge, we will have to switch to a more one-to-one education. I mean, in my knitting lab right now, I'm allowed to bring a maximum of 5 people into a lab that used to have 25 students in it. So I think we're gonna see as much more going to online, but we're gonna have a much more intimate experience when we do have those experiences with the students. We'll probably have to do a lot more of it, so that means it's going to distribute out in some ways, and we might end up in situations where older students teach younger students. Kind of the ideal that we've always wanted to have happen will become the necessity of the situation.
Please.
Yes, I can try. As we said, education is not about to give the other people something to eat, notion to eat. It's mostly about other things, as Alessandra said, but also you, Andrea, mentioning your son, the last one. And so I have something that happened in my lesson. I think it's a question of expression. If you help the people to express themselves, and the other people can see the expression of the other in a way that can work. So it's not a theater way, but it's another way. If the people can see the expression of the people, they can find connection. I know that my students said that they create group. They have never met, but they have created group. Because in our university, some people don't know one another. We have a big university. Many students are working, so they go there, but we don't have a campus like other university has. We go to the classes and then we go away. So in this way, the people know each other because they started to express, and they create group, although they didn't met until now. And there was an unexpected benefit that I found with online lessons. And it create connection as well. All the family was around the screen. When there was the lesson, there was the mother, there was the partner, and they all discussed the day about the lesson, people that would never been at the university. So I received mail from mothers saying, well, I want to come to the university. And then we speak with my daughter has a problem with, but in this way, she could find her way. And one time there is some, can the mother come in the camera? So what did I want to say with this unexpected benefit is that we recreate in the place relationship. So the people were not with me or with the student, but we are with the mother, with the father, with the partner, speaking about. So education can be also like that, if we can create connection in a special situation. Because I have to say that the results of my course were very good. I've never had results like that with my students when I had the exam. But we don't have to think this because it was a pandemic time. Students told me that they were waiting the day that there was the lesson because they could be online, they can see other people. And they have a level of meditation that we cannot expect in a normal life. So we had to think that also we can obtain in this was in a pandemic moment when the people cannot go out from home. So it's like the life arrived for them where there was the lesson online. And also some students said, when I am in a class, when the lesson is over, I start to think other things. When I turn off the video, I still there with the thinking and remain in my room. So there are not bus to take and go in the traffic, meet other people. So it was a place of meditation. It was more like a monastery where you stay with the word. If you are able to put the right word, to give the same, the right movie to watch, the theater to think. So what I think for the future, I think something that to merge these two possibilities, because we have never really done that. So lesson in presence, but as you are doing, for example, in Seoul, also having the connection with the other people that cannot be there. And to create more place of meditation, create a silence around a class. It's more like a place like that we had to create, a place of meditation that was not before just running from a place from another, and it didn't work. In this moment we had that. So we have to find a way to recreate that in this other way.
Thank you, Gilberto. It's interesting how you managed to recreate the theater community extended to the families. That seems to be also very Italian. I wonder if it's a cultural aspect and it might extend to other countries or is very specific to Italy. But this sense of community, and also what Maribeth Berry mentioned in the comments, students have become more creative, maybe because they were given more responsibility through this process. So do you, sure. Yes.
It's true, I agree. Then I will say something for someone asked something for theater, but I will do later because.
Yes. Dehong, please.
Oh, yes. Well, I see school is very strange place because students are current generation, right? But they are taught by the previous generations in the system of the previous of the previous. So, well, it has been a long time discussion topic that school should change, but they hardly did for many reasons. Maybe now is the real time for change for school. Well, school traditionally used teaching method, which means teachers strongly lead the students. Well, this could be done because teachers tend to know more about the knowledge in such area. But on the other hand, the students nowadays can easily search and find that knowledge, what they want, through the internet faster than their teachers. So in my opinion, in the future, one of the biggest role of teachers will not be teach, but more likely coach for the students, which means the teachers should set up the educational goal for their students and tell them the knowledge, not directly, but tell them what to find and how to find the information for the educational goal. Then students will be more likely self-learning or self-motivative. That's what I think.
Great. Anyone wants to continue this answer?
I mean, I really agree with what Day just said, and this idea that, yeah, that you can see, it's like every year you can see like a bigger gap. You know, I see a bigger gap between myself and the students that are coming in, and it's amazing. Also, as someone that has a young daughter, you know, that's now 11, I can see that just what they're learning in elementary school and their ability to research and their ability to navigate vast amounts of information and organize it and find meaning is something that is so foreign to my experience at that age. And so I do think that, you know, perhaps this is, you know, like a watershed moment for education, that because we, as Gilberto was saying, that, you know, this is not only that we were online, but we were forced to go online and shut everything out. And, you know, I think that, you know, I would like to acknowledge, you know, I'm in the United States, which is leading number one of pandemic, and also and I think also that is stirring up all of these other things in our country. You know, this long, you know, suppressed racial tension has also come to the surface, and so I think that, you know, that only to say that something about that silence, something about that that opportunity to meditate and reflect is pulling up all of the things in our you know, our global society about how we're interconnected, what things are not working, you know, and forcing us to kind of address these issues in a way that I hope we won't just blindly look away from and go back to normal. We shouldn't go back to normal. I think that, you know, this should be a moment for us to really try to push harder into creating the futures that we think are needed. And I think that, you know, something that has been a core tenet of what CultureHub is about is this idea that we need creativity, we need artists to be in dialogue with technology, not because it's, you know, exciting or flashy or interesting, but rather because we have to develop humane technologies. And the only way that we're going to do that is to do it ourselves, because the motivating factors for the production of technology is largely, you know, from the corporate sector, is either to make money or to collect our data or to control us. And so where does that resistance lie, and how can young people be in that space of dialogue? Like, you mentioned hubs, for example, and a student using an avatar in hubs. I recently was exposed to a project that is essentially hubs, you know, maybe arguably better in some ways, using peer-to-peer connections, that was made by a team of 3 people, you know, and, you know, some of them being college students. So we're at a point with where web technologies have developed, and there has been this new openness where we can create the tools to be able to do the things we want to do. One of the things that I miss so much as someone that's coming from the background of performances, we're doing online performance, but we miss our lobby. We miss the spontaneity of being able to bump into someone and to have these conversations. And, you know, this tool, it's called Yorb, made by a student from the Interactive Telecommunications program. You know, I was like, wow, you know, this small team created this possibility where we can actually have a lobby, we can have a virtual venue, we can walk around, we can bump into people, and we can have experiences. And so I think that it's also the role of, you know, educational institutions and teachers to begin to bring these tools together, begin to create kind of a constellation and an ecosystem that that can serve, like we shouldn't be limited to these singular platforms, and we're going to have to be creative in developing new tools that can help us facilitate, interaction and educational activities. I'll get off my soapbox.
Mariko Camacho is addressing also the issue of the collaboration with science disciplines and advocate for green arts and design. And some of your universities, Amsterdam University of Applied Science, I know has been focusing a lot on sustainability, and maybe it would be interesting to hear also from Frank in his idea of interactive spaces and interfaces. How could that be part of education in your experience?
Well, there were so many topics addressed just in a couple of minutes, so I have to sort of work my brain out. But maybe I'll touch on the topic of sustainability later. But first, I want to react on Billy and the others that if we are, because I was thinking about this too, like all the ethical consequences of going online with these young people. We haven't really thought about this. We just jumped in and we did it. But indeed, like Billy says, like we have to maybe look for ways that of small parts of software that can work together, and that's what I want to say is we have to be really careful, I think, not to grab on to something like Microsoft Teams because our boss tells us to, because in the end we get stuck, we get locked in this system, and it's very hard to get out. So I think we're now on this pivotal point that we should be very aware of this. So that's the first thing I want to say. And the other thing is that that even my students come up with solutions as I'm working with them, and they say to me like, "Hey, you have like 5 systems you work on, so can we build something in a couple of weeks that you can maybe propose to your to the university?" So that's also a very interesting development, because our students are also, and it's a bit of a shame that we don't have students in our panel, because I'm always interested in their opinions in these. But maybe I'm rambling on a bit, but there's a lot of things that touch on these topics. So how to get it sustainable, that's and green, that's a whole different ball game. I would say maybe the same answer, like watch out for Google and watch out for Microsoft Teams and the Zooms and all the big corporations that want our money and our data. Maybe that's my 2 cents.
Great. So did everyone answer this question? Do you want to add something more? Please.
Just to respond to Frank, what's happened in my program is we're moving to the students' spaces. So we're using Discord, and Discord is going to become the platform we use for bulletin board and so on in first year. And the problem with Zoom, the embodiment issue is really problematic for me in my first year courses. So we're going to move to Minecraft. And we picked not the Microsoft version because it's extremely limited, but what we're trying to do is inhabit the student spaces, and Minecraft is a common platform. Most of them already have accounts, and it allows us to have some sort of physicality, even though it's virtual and it's not. It kind of goes a little bit to what Billy was saying, trying to replicate that idea of having a shared space that we can go into. One of our big problems is our makerspace. We have a makerspace. How do we recreate the community that exists in that space? which is so crucial to the learning of the students. I mean, so much of their learning is informal and happens when they're building their machines and talking to one another. And Zoom can't duplicate that, but some place like Minecraft, where they can build things, is going to, we hope, be part of our solution. So I know one of the first things we're going to do is challenges in Minecraft, making them build systems in Minecraft to see, you know, get them building, the whole learning associated with that. It will be helpful, we hope.
Unfortunately, in Minecraft, the fashion aesthetic is kind of blocky, but other than that, I think it's a really great place. Just to point out there, though, I think it's really important as we move towards these more online systems that we don't actually lose the amount of resources we have for teachers. I've lost an incredible amount of research time as we transferred over to online learning, because the only place we had to take it from was the research time. And I would hope that we could invent tools that actually open up more research time for my researchers and for the people who lecture with me. Because if we could make these tools so that the students are learning in other places and my people have more time to research, I think we can actually come up with faster ideas and better ideas that can grow and change this in a better way.
So somebody in the question list is mentioning that the student, this is Dianing Ratri, our student said that it is more difficult for them to get feedback and critique during online class. With synchronized online class like webinar, it is really possible, but how about the asynchronized classes where students access the lecture in different time? Do you have any recommendation? And also someone earlier asked a similar question about giving feedbacks in you know, online setting to theater students. So what is your experience of coaching the students and giving them feedback?
Well, as I said before, I created different places so the student can express in different ways. So we have the lesson in class, in virtual class. We have a forum online where the question can, where the issues can be put by me or also by the student themselves, and they start a conversation there. And we have Facebook. I use Facebook, a closed group, for putting video on, to present research and to discuss about that. So I think the ways to create, then there are many other possibilities. These are the three that I've used: a Moodle forum, a Facebook, and the online lessons. And then I was on Teams with the university, and we have all the chat with Teams. So the chat remains, so you can always go and see. So I think the way is to create different possibilities so that the students can find different moment and different way, because there is someone that cannot really speak easily in this way, also because we are not speaking about the difficulty of connections. Of course, there are students with lots of difficulty of connection, and there are, so in this way you have all the time and you can do that. And I can also go online and see what they are, and then create topics, specific topics on the forum to reinforce the discussion around that. As for the theater, just 2 words to the person that asked. Theater is very difficult to teach. I think it's impossible to teach in this way. When I had to cope with some piece of theater, I was working with Pirandello, Trovarsi. It doesn't work when you have different characters to work, because of the delay, it doesn't work at all. So I only work where there are two characters, and so good connections. So in this way you can work a little bit around theater, but you can't. Theater is about presence, so we have to say something about that. Theater is really hard to give feedback. And then there are the physical theater that I use as well, and for that Zoom was good more than others, and then you can use with different part of the body. So probably it's more easy to working with hands and not with all the body. So you have to be creative as well, students to be creative as well, to find different ways to tell, to communicate, to reinvent a way of speaking.
In terms of feedback, I feel that, and I want to ask you this, maybe there is also different when you have a small group of students rather than a large group of students, because if it's a small group of students, it's maybe easier. But when it's a lot of students, like it happens that we have 30 or 40 students classes. How do you, what's your thought about this? Maybe this number of students in classes also should change if we continue.
Unfortunately, we have 100, not 30, 40.
Yeah, the same here. We have 80 to 150 students in a lot of our classrooms.
So different platform, different possibilities, different way of speaking, and during the week, you give different feedback. Not all at the moment. That's what I can say.
Sorry, Alexandra.
Yes, sorry, I was reading the feed. In terms of evaluation, there are different strategies. One strategy that we've been told by our educational expert is avoid lecturing, because it gets, if you can lecture, record it, and then use your class time for feedback. So instead of using the lecture, what would normally be lecture time to introduce information, use it to look at what students have done. And another method when you have a lot of students is to get the students to do peer-based evaluation as well. And you can model that. So in a critique situation, you as the instructor can do 1 or 2 critiques with students who volunteer to have their work looked at. Obviously, one of the issues is the ability to see the physical work. So one thing that's really excellent in this platform is the emphasis on documentation. All of a sudden, students have to really be able to document well. And I found that in my classes, their documentation got much better, because they were realizing, oh, no one can go around this. So putting some emphasis on that. But also, once you've modeled the critique process a few times, the students understand the language. What I found in my classes, I'm a big personality, so it's hard for them sometimes to enter a dialogue. It's much easier to put them in groups, get them to enter in that dialogue together. Once they have a model to go from, they'll do it with each other. And it's actually way more effective because they're not afraid of each other, which, with a faculty member, very often they're intimidated. And then the work can become getting the students, once they got this feedback, to reflect on the feedback they got and to see how they would evaluate their work and how they would change it. So the method changes. The teacher is not necessarily the expert all the time, but part of our expertise is the language, is the method. How are you constructive in your criticism? How do you say things without tearing someone's heart out, right? And then helping them model it as much as possible. And that can be done virtually.
I just have to say, I think it's funny. I use peer review and peer grade in courses of 20 students. I not even 100. I don't want to be the only person giving a review there. So I strongly support the use of those tools.
Yeah, maybe I can add that I think that the peer review is fantastic, but you have to facilitate it. Because if you ask students like, okay, now do a peer review, they're not going to do it. So in my experience, it's really, you have to facilitate the whole process of peer reviewing. And it's incredible value for them as well, because they have to think about, okay, what's wrong with this product, but also how I am going to tell these people that's also a learning thing for them.
That's also where the reflection comes in. If they have to think through the process, they will learn the methodology, right? It's another component. That's where the evaluation takes place, is actually the reflective part. But it's a personal reflection, right? So they by doing that, they have to think it through. And then you can make them do polls, poll each other. It could be fun, actually. You can gamify the classroom a little bit and make them responsible for take over the critique, make one group having to do the critique. We can be on the side, the guide, as Dea was mentioning, and helping them when they get stuck. But really, it's about them learning how to do these things, not us doing them, I think.
So it's interesting, you all have been talking about self-learning, self-evaluation, or peer evaluation, review, and how to organize the environment of the class. So this giving the responsibility to the students actually does not mean being less organized in your class, but actually having a stronger model that can, like a building, support the participation of all the various students and give them the freedom to follow a model. So it would seem that is a less problems, but it's actually, I imagine and experience that it is more work and preparation.
I've also found it really useful if you switch the tool each time, which they'll complain to no end, but they will understand the philosophy behind the tool at the end. So I use 3 different peer review systems in one course in one semester just to keep them on their toes.
So we are approaching the last 10 minutes of our webinar. The time is flying, and here in Korea is close to midnight. In New York and Toronto, maybe you didn't even have your coffee yet, but I really appreciate also the participation of all the attendees. So I would like to ask you in these last 10 minutes, if you could give us in a short time some conclusion that you like to share, and when possible, address some of these pending questions. When possible, if you feel that it's related. De Hong or Billy, maybe you have been a bit quiet lately, so I would encourage you to just start this series of conclusions.
You're pointing at me, right, Billy? Conclusions. I mean, I don't know. I think like I believe I let the others conclude these panels or conversation, but I kind of feeling that I strongly want to share like good example of using online system in my school. The classes for this semester. I actually steal the pictures from the classes. Hang on. So, hang on. Oh. Do you see the presentations? No?
No, it's
Not
black.
yet.
It's a black.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Okay.
Okay, now we can see.
Okay. Okay. So, well, I'd like to share the 2 best cases that my school picked among the classes from this semester using online system. The first class is from movie department, that's which I'm really showing right now. The professor name is Jae So, and the class is called Movie Production Workshop. The professor adopted the COVID-19 situation, and he even used it as in the theme of the class, which means he set a rule for the students that they should teamed up and make movies by not meeting each other at all, but only meeting in online. So there were a lot of questions arose the first time, but after some sort of arrangement, eventually 150 students made a total of 15 films in the class. The director role students had to guide their team crew everything by Zoom or SNS, and the cameraman role students had to teach how to set up and shoot the camera to their actors or actresses. Then the actor and actresses had to shoot themselves by following the instructions. The Professor So says that there were so many regulations and limitations in order to make movie online, but actually it made the students more creative and made them the beautiful job. Another example is from the acting department. The professor's name is Jung-sun Choi, and the class name is the breathing and sound, the making sound or voices. And this is about how to control the body and make proper sounds and voices for the acting. She thought that it'd be impossible to teach the class online at the beginning, but when she made a lecture video clips with the help from the students and uploaded it online. She found that the students were extremely happy with it because they can watch it repeatedly and practice over and over. I will show you some. Do you see the video clips, YouTube? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I wouldn't play whole thing, but I put a little bit so it give you the sense of how she made the video clips.
이미지를 연상했을 때 어떤 것들이 떠오르시나요, 여러분? 혹시 똥꼬에
Do you hear it? No?
Yes.
Okay.
힘을 주고 배에 힘을 주고 가갸 거겨 했었던 것이 떠오르시나요? 그렇다면 여러분의 생각을 다 쏟아가서 던져버려! 여러분, 활성은 그런 게 아니에요. 시작. 학교 종이 땡땡.
So basically, she demonstrate with the students how to, control the body and make voices, and the students had to learn it by watching the video, but they have to film it, shooting themselves with the cell phones, because there's a lot of good applications to take a video in each mobile phone, right? So and then she evaluate how they change their controlling skill for their body and voices. So as you can see, she made a video like a famous YouTubers, so the students can watch it fun and without any objections. I mean, it's really a lot of regulation and limitations using online lectures. It's difficult to maintain tensions and concentration with online classes. It's difficult to get motivations. It's difficult to evaluate how much the students have learned. It's little room for students to ask questions and engage in. And teachers have to actively use emails, chat systems, or any SNS platform in order to communicate with their students. I know it is really hard, and it's really time consuming for teachers, because it's for me too. But however, I do not think that this is the final solution for the future. But I believe this is like transitional era to schools to next level that we all discussed or wanted, I guess.
We are thrown into a moment of change, the art of teaching we never had before, says Christine Smaller.
I think it's true, because we have to think what is teaching about, and what is the relevance of the body in learning. And so it's a great opportunity. I agree. And I think we have to discover always way in which we can create relationship, deepen relationship, to maintain the focus on relationship, and to the creativity of expression in the different places, because humanity has such a big gift that can create in all the situation. But we have to change our mind. I would say open our mind and find what we can do about ourselves and the meeting with the other. Whatever it is, a human being and the culture as well. It's always a meeting. It's always a meeting. The question of real or not real relationship. True.
And I hope our role as universities will be to continue to help students be the best human they can be, like finding our humanities. I came across a term of empathic communication in the last few weeks, and I love that term, because it really is about how do we build empathy towards each other, our environments, our processes, and also help them see difference. Because that's one thing that happens at the university level, is we see people who are different from ourselves, and we enter in conversations with them, and we grow through that, right? The ability to see, oh, not everybody is the same way. My world is not everybody's world. So I think we'll continue to be places of exchange, and the modalities may change, but I think our role will cement as building our humane societies, particularly as machines start taking over the job place increasingly, what will we become as humans? It will be we're entering a very fascinating time.
I mean, I agree also that there's this, you know, again, on this moment, as this transitional moment, you know, I think that one of the things that is potentially positive that's come out of the pandemic is that because it's forced us all to move online, we've, there are certain, I think, certain industries, certain people that have sort of neglected online presence as being a valid presence. And I think that in this circumstance, no one can deny that take away the internet from us, we would all go mad, you know, because we are, as human beings, all striving for connection, interconnection, you know, and so maybe it will help us embrace hybridity and also actually reflect value back onto the physicality. Because I think, you know, what is it going to be like to be in the theater with an audience and to see, you know, two performers touch, you know, after this, we find our way out of this pandemic, the meaning is going to be completely and utterly changed, right? And maybe, I don't know, that makes me kind of emotional even to think about that. Even like the image, you know, Cecily, you shared of, you know, you coming towards an embrace and then not being able to embrace. These are our realities, of course, contact and touch, and these things can never be replaced. But I think that, but we are dealing with generations that are coming up as I think, you know, Alexandra, you were saying that so much deep exchange is happening in these virtual platforms and in social media, and I think as, you know, generations that didn't grow up with that, maybe we aren't as we aren't as aware of how deep the value can be. So maybe this is a moment where we see that we can kind of extend and live across these different zones.
And none of you just really said about having to go online with your students. Is there, if there was no need, would you work like that?
I'm looking forward to meeting my students, also the one that I had said I will have a party also in my house because I want to meet these people. So of course, it's not a joy to pass from presence online, but
I have to say though that I already did. I was a teacher inside of the Fab Academy and the Textile Academy, and we've done these distributed courses all over the world. And I think that was a really good training camp for what was about to happen in this situation, where, you know, the Fab Academy really already understood how to distribute this and what it would mean to have the same technology in places all over the planet, so that we could all be actually working on similar projects in the same place. So I think it was an interesting time because it put more meaning to being physically co-located, but at the same time, it showed us how our distributed nature could already be applied to emergent situations.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Troy, with everybody. I think both environments have advantages and disadvantages, and probably will end up in hybrids, but most of our universities are moving to international initiatives, which require collaboration to be networked. And the hub is an example of this cultural hub, but also like Ryerson has, FCAT has another one, which is Global Campus Networks, which is again broadcasting across all over the world, students building shows across the world. So this was coming anyway. I think this is just now this crisis is making the shift happen and finalize itself, but this was on its way.
Alexandra, thank you for mentioning it, because in fact, I noticed that your university has a similar project to the CultureHub. So it would be interesting to continue this discussion as we expand our directions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so our time is up after the 90 minutes Zoom may explode. So I really want to thank you, everyone. It's been very informative, and as good seminars, it feels too short. So it will open many questions, and I'm sure that the conversation will continue. I will also collect the comments of the attendees and share it with you. There are people that are asking more information, so it would be great if you can follow up in your time. And for all of you and for the people that attended online, I want to remind that this webinar will be recorded and transcribed, and soon will be available also for further references in the attempt to continue stimulate the conversation. And maybe we give each other appointment in, I don't know, 6 months to see what has happened in this time. And maybe we can all show some results of our respective classes.
Okay.
We will do a festival of online education.
Online education. Great.
Sounds wonderful. Yes, this was our first step. And we can keep in touch and share further and experiment further. Hopefully the grave situation will turn out to be positive in the end. Praying.
Thank you everyone for your time, and thank you to our students that are helping us learning new ways of being possibly good teachers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.